We were halfway through our final family trip when a stranger pulled up, screaming my wife's name, and calling her his fiancée. That was the moment I realized the woman I'd loved for 20 years had been living a double life. I never imagined that a simple family vacation could unravel everything I believed about my marriage. But that's exactly what happened. A complete stranger showed up out of nowhere and, right in front of our daughters, called my wife his fiancée. That was the moment I realized my entire marriage had been built on a lie. We were getting ready to leave the campground, and since there was still a bit of room left in the freezer, I figured I'd run over to Kroger to pick up a few extra things for the trip. As I stood there trying to remember what we might still need, my eyes drifted toward our 40-foot luxury van. My wife, Hannah, was casually leaning on the window frame, laughing about something, completely relaxed. We had been married for 2 decades. This vacation was supposed to be meaningful. Possibly our last big family road trip before our twin daughters, both 18, started college at the University of Texas at Austin in just a few short weeks. Everyone had been excited about the trip, but I couldn't ignore the feeling that something had shifted lately. Hannah had seemed emotionally distant for months, and deep down I was hoping this trip might bring us back together somehow. I wanted more than anything to feel that old connection again, not just with her but with our girls too. I suggested we take a short walk together before hitting the road, maybe explore the area a little while the weather was still cool. We had no hard schedule to follow, and the drive from Fort Worth to Amarillo wasn't long. We had all day to get there. I had just started loading our gear into the external compartments of the van, double-checking that everything we'd need for the night was inside as well. Meanwhile, our daughters, Haley and Brooke, were lounging in the living area, completely absorbed in their phones. They were texting friends, probably trying to stay plugged into the social world they were leaving behind for a month. At their age, relationships changed constantly, new friendships forming while others faded away, all wrapped in the chaos of senior year drama. Their phones were their lifelines to that world. Fortunately, the van gave us flexibility. We could park at different campgrounds and use our Highlander for day trips, which I hoped would offer enough variety and adventure to keep the girls distracted from what they were missing back home. "I'll make a quick list so we don't forget anything," Hannah said, puckering her lips playfully and blowing a little kiss in my direction. "I love you, sweetheart," she added softly before turning back toward the interior of the van. That morning she had on her usual relaxed but attractive outfit: black yoga pants, a fitted tank top and white sneakers. Her blonde hair was pulled into a neat ponytail, and a soft gloss highlighted her lips. She still had the slim, athletic build from her college volleyball days, having only put on about 11 pounds over the years. Despite the time that had passed, she still had that same striking beauty that always made people glance twice. There was a brightness in her that morning, an energy that almost felt nostalgic, like she was revisiting a place that held good memories. When I first pitched the idea of this trip, she was hesitant, unsure if it was the right time. But over the last few weeks, I saw her warm up to it. Her reluctance gave way to excitement. It had been years since we last used the van for a real trip, probably not since before the pandemic disrupted everything. The girls were just as eager, maybe even more so. They talked about this trip like it was the second coming of our Disneyland vacation from when they were kids. They definitely took after Hannah when it came to looks, but they inherited my love for numbers and problem solving. Both of them showed real interest in engineering, but underneath it all, they were still teenagers, eager for adventure and ready to make memories. I had just tucked the last suitcase into place when the sharp screech of tires grabbed my attention. A red Mustang came to a sudden halt, narrowly avoiding the back of our van. The door flung open and a young guy, maybe 20 at most, jumped out. He had a strong build, athletic, clean-shaven except for a mustache and short-cropped blonde hair. He looked like the kind of guy who spent hours in the gym, definitely in better shape than I was after 20 years of marriage and settling into what I call a dad body. I straightened up immediately, instinctively preparing myself for, well, I didn't know what yet, but something told me this wasn't going to be good. I'd packed on about 20 pounds since college, and just recently, I'd started running again in hopes of shedding some of it. But in that moment, health was the last thing on my mind. The young man was already storming toward me, his face contorted in rage. His voice rang out before he even got close. "Where is she, you lying piece of trash?" he yelled, his voice filled with raw emotion. I stepped back stunned. His fury was so intense it felt like it reached out and smacked me in the chest. Hannah, come out. I'm getting you away from this monster," he bellowed, desperation shaking his voice. My heart dropped. My brain couldn't make sense of what I was hearing. Who was this guy? Why was he yelling my wife's name like that? "Who are you?" I shouted back, my voice shaking a little as I squared up, refusing to back down. "Where's Hannah?" he demanded again, even louder this time. His tone was so intense it made my stomach turn. Just then Haley and Brooke stepped out of the van. Their eyes were wide with confusion and fear. I saw them both instinctively reach for their phones, starting to record the scene playing out in front of them. Hannah followed them out, and the second she saw the guy, it was like all the blood drained from her face. She froze. Her breath hitched. She looked like she was staring into a nightmare she never expected to see in daylight. "Hannah, come on," the young man said, his voice softer now but urgent. "Let's go. You don't have to pretend anymore. I'm taking you away from this miserable life." He reached out, offering his hand like it was something familiar, something she was supposed to take without question. Haley and Brooke instinctively wrapped their arms around their mom, like they were trying to protect her from him. "Mom, who is this guy?" one of them asked, her voice shaky. "Why would he call Dad cruel?" But Hannah didn't say a word. She just stood there, her eyes flicking between me and this stranger, like her whole world had started to collapse. Then he looked straight at our girls and said calmly and clearly, "I'm Hannah's fiancé. We're waiting on her divorce to be finalized so we can get married." My heart nearly stopped. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to breathe, forcing myself to stay grounded. My daughters were watching this unfold, and filming it. I couldn't afford to lose my temper, even if everything inside me was screaming. "Mom, is that true?" Brooke asked quietly, eyes wide with disbelief. I turned slowly to Hannah, my voice dry and hollow. "Hannah, do you know this man? Are you engaged to him?" The question just lingered in the air like a thick fog, impossible to avoid. She looked back at me with a gaze I couldn't decipher, part fear, part shame, part something else I didn't even have a name for. And still, she said nothing. I turned toward the young man, doing everything I could to keep my voice calm, though I felt anything but. "How long have you been involved with my wife?" I asked, making sure every word came out steady and clear. For the first time since he came barreling out of that red Mustang, he paused. Something shifted in his expression, like a crack in the confidence he'd arrived with. His eyes dropped for a split second before he looked back up and answered. 9 months, he said almost defiantly. We started seeing each other when the school year began. A cold, uneasy weight settled in my gut. If it started around the beginning of the school year, then what did that mean? Was he a teacher? A coach? Someone from the high school my daughters attended? His athletic frame and the way he carried himself made the possibility feel all too real. He squared his shoulders, like he was preparing for a courtroom speech. "She told me everything about you," he continued, his voice growing sharper. "She said you manipulate her. That you control the kids. That you treat them all terribly, emotionally and physically. I came here to get her out of that." That's when Brooke, my oldest by just 3 minutes, stepped forward. Her face was a storm of confusion and anger. "That's a lie," she snapped. "Our dad's never been anything like that. And if Mom actually said those things, then she lied to you." Haley's voice trembled as she stared at her mother. "Mom, did you really say those things about Dad?" Hannah opened her mouth as if to explain. But nothing clear came out. "Let me explain," she started, barely audible. "Explain?" Haley cut her off, her voice cracking. "Are you sleeping with this man? Are you cheating on Dad?" The world felt frozen in that moment. All 3 of them, my daughters and the woman I'd built a life with, stood there crying. Each tear felt like a blow to the foundation I thought we had. I didn't respond. There was no speech left in me, no words that could stitch this moment back together. I turned in silence, walked over to the van and opened the luggage compartment. I pulled out Hannah's suitcase, one of the rolling ones with the scuffed corners from years of travel together. Without saying a word, I walked it over and held it out to her. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet, it was suffocating. It pressed against all of us as we stood there, caught in the collapse of something we thought would last forever. We got back in the van and continued the drive through Texas. The land rolled out endlessly in front of us, flat and unforgiving, like the emotional wasteland we now found ourselves in. The road blurred past. We passed by Wichita Falls without stopping. I didn't even register the buildings or the billboards. I just stared ahead. I remembered a piece I'd once read in Texas Monthly when I was younger, visiting my grandparents. It listed the worst jobs in the state, and for some reason the 9th one always stuck with me: chicken sexer. Someone who sorts baby chicks by gender all day long. At the time it sounded so ridiculous I laughed. But now it didn't seem so funny. Some jobs are messy, thankless, and they wear you down until you're not sure who you are anymore. That's what I felt like now. Not a husband, not even really a father in that moment. Just someone sorting through the pieces of a life that no longer made sense. We didn't speak much as we rolled into Quanah. The quiet in the van was thick. No music. No small talk. Just the hum of the tires against the pavement. My mind wandered back, years back, long before any of this. My mom, Emily, had been best friends with Hannah's mom, Teresa, since the 8th grade. They had gone to prom together as friends, shared dorms at North Texas State University, even walked across the graduation stage on the same day. It was there that Teresa met David, a quiet, soft-spoken law student. A few weeks after they started dating, David introduced Emily to his best friend, Robert, also studying law. 2 years later, Teresa and David were married. Not long after, so were my parents. And within the same year, both couples had their first kids. The two families were always close. Picnics, holidays, shared vacations. That kind of storybook friendship that seemed like it was meant to last. That's the love I grew up believing in. That's the model I thought I was following. And now here I was, sitting in the same van where we once took family road trips, staring out at the empty plains, wondering if any of it had ever been real. I had worked so hard over the years to build something lasting. I was fortunate. I owned the rights to several patents and had the freedom to shape my work life the way I saw fit. I made the decision to license 3 of them and used the 4th to launch a manufacturing venture. It started as 2 separate teams, but over time we merged into one. We thrived. We built something solid. And for a long while, it felt like Hannah and I were building that kind of strength together. But life has a cruel way of shifting when you're not watching. Things started to crumble after we lost the baby. Her miscarriage broke something in her, something I didn't know how to reach. The light she once had dimmed slowly over time. She pulled away, and no matter how gently I tried to reach her, she shut me out. I suggested therapy. I offered quiet support. But every effort seemed to push her further away. Every word became a trigger. Eventually she stopped just shutting me out, she distanced herself from everyone. Friends, social circles, family gatherings. Even her online presence faded. She folded in on herself, and I walked through each day unsure of what would upset her next. I tiptoed around the house like a stranger in my own home. I turned to our mothers for help. They told me to be patient, to give her space. She'll come back to you, they said. But deep down I knew she wasn't coming back at all. The truth comes out. When I finally asked her directly, I already had my answer. I'd seen enough, little signs, strange absences, half-truths. I just needed to hear her say it. Are you having an affair? I asked, keeping my voice low and steady. She didn't look me in the eye. No, she said quickly. I'm not cheating. There's no affair. Then who is he? I pressed, swallowing the lump in my throat. He's just a friend, she replied, her tone stiff like the words were rehearsed. It's not what you think. I want a name, I said. Who is this friend that thinks it's okay to kiss you? She looked like she might say something, but then she stopped herself. I can't tell you, she said after a pause. But it's over. It won't happen again. We'll stay friends, but the other stuff, it's done. I stared at her, heart pounding. There was no apology. No remorse. Just a quiet attempt to control the damage, like she was negotiating a ceasefire, not healing a wound. Later that night, I opened her messages. I expected them to be gone, deleted, scrubbed clean. But they were all there. Dozens of them. Every flirty exchange, every plan made behind my back. She didn't even try to hide it. And maybe in her mind she didn't need to. Maybe because in her world, emotional betrayal didn't count unless there was physical proof. But I knew the truth. If I hadn't caught it, she would have crossed that line eventually. It wasn't a question of if, only when. At first, I couldn't wrap my head around just how many stories like mine were out there. But the more I read, the more I realized I wasn't some rare case. Turns out, there are thousands of folks out there, just like me, completely blindsided by someone they trusted more than anyone in the world. After everything came crashing down, I laid out my terms to Hannah, plain and simple. Any more lies, any more secrets, and we were done. No second chances. No gray areas. If she wanted even a shot at repairing what she broke, she'd have to live by my rules. Her phone's location services had to stay on, always. I monitored everything, calls, texts, her movements. I even set up a cloned iPhone to mirror hers, checking it multiple times a day. On top of that, I logged into our shared app store account to keep tabs on any apps she downloaded. I looked for anything suspicious. Hidden chat apps, fake calculators, even journaling apps that could double as message vaults. To anyone else it probably seemed excessive. Controlling. Maybe even paranoid. But after what I'd been through, trust wasn't an option. It was surveillance or nothing. And she agreed. At least she said she did. For a while, I almost let myself believe it might work. That maybe, just maybe, something could be salvaged. But I knew better. Trust isn't something you rebuild with rules. I wasn't healing anything, I was just trying to delay the moment I'd have to face what I already knew. Years before all this chaos, Hannah got some devastating news. She tested positive for a genetic mutation that increased her risk of breast cancer. Her doctor laid out the options, and after weighing the risks, she opted for a lumpectomy instead of a full mastectomy. I knew how much pride she took in her body. It was one of the things she'd worked hard to maintain even after having twins. The thought of losing that part of herself hit her hard. She spiraled into a deep depression that lasted for months. She started pulling away from everyone, me, the girls, even her closest friends. The smallest things would send her into a tailspin, and the home that once felt warm and full of laughter turned cold and tense. I tried my best to be supportive, to hold it all together. But no matter what I did, it never seemed to be enough. That morning, after her so-called fiancé showed up, the silence in the van was suffocating. No one said a word. The air between us was thick with heartbreak and disbelief. My daughters, who had once begged me to forgive Hannah after the first time she betrayed us, sat in stunned silence. They had watched it unfold right in front of them, twice now. It wasn't just hurt anymore. It was disillusionment. And then there was the other guy. That poor kid. He truly believed Hannah was a woman stuck in a cold, loveless marriage, just waiting for the divorce papers to come through. When the truth came out, I saw the shock on his face. She hadn't just lied to me, she had lied to him too. She wove this elaborate fiction, pulling him in, tearing apart our family in the process. There was nothing left to fix. Once our time in Texas wrapped up, we took the van east, trying to salvage some part of the journey. We spent a few days in Nashville, but it didn't feel the way it should have. There was no excitement. No joy. Just a heavy fog of what was coming next. The divorce that now loomed over every meal, every shared glance. After Nashville, we made a short stop in Memphis. But the truth followed us wherever we went. This wasn't just the breakdown of a marriage. This was the unraveling of everything I thought my life would be. I had looked forward to visiting Graceland for years. After we all watched that Elvis movie, with Austin Butler giving a performance that had even the girls obsessed, it felt like the perfect stop. A chance to soak up something timeless before everything around us changed for good. Our route took us through Memphis, then into Arkansas before winding back to where it all began, our home in Fort Worth. It had been a month-long road trip, one we would never forget, but not for any of the reasons we'd hoped. Because life has a way of rewriting your plans, no matter how carefully you make them. Now that the twins were 18, it was time to speak to them not as kids, but as young adults. They had witnessed everything. They deserved honesty, not fairy tales. I wasn't going to hide the truth just to protect an image. Nobody wants to be the villain in their own story. But that's the cruel thing about betrayal, it forces you into roles you never asked for. I kept thinking about something I read years ago, the drama triangle. 3 roles, the victim, the rescuer, and the villain. For Hannah to justify what she did, she had to see herself as the victim, paint the young man as her rescuer, and cast me as the villain. That was the only way her actions could make sense in her head. That was how she could still believe she was a good person. Then the messages started coming in. First it was just a few texts, angry, panicked. Then came the voice messages. Peter, please call me. This is serious. You need to pick up the phone. I'm not playing. Each one more frantic than the last. I can't believe you're doing this. You're making a huge mistake. And believe me, it won't end well. And I started to wonder, was she panicking because she lost something real? Or because she finally had to face the consequences of her choices? Then came messages from others. Peter, your wife is losing it. You need to step in. This has gone too far. And then a voice I recognized, calm, measured. Peter, look. I know things are complicated. But whatever she's done, she's still your wife. You need to act like a man and support her. I sat there staring at the message. Support her? After everything? After she tore our family apart, lied to all of us, and built a future with someone else behind my back? There was nothing left to support. Reality hit like a wall when we finally pulled into our driveway. The girls were weeks away from starting college at UT, and everything was moving fast. The plan had always been to rent a trailer, hitch it to my truck, and drive them to campus together. Since they were sharing a dorm their first semester, it was supposed to be easy. But Hannah had managed to complicate even that. Chaos followed her like a shadow, and in just a matter of weeks, she had thrown our lives into complete disarray. As we pulled in, exhausted from the drive, I saw someone sitting on our porch. My father. He was just waiting. Hands clasped. Come. I looked around, confused. Something wasn't right. Then he looked up and said, "Your mom's home." I stared at him, unsure what he meant. "At her place?" I asked cautiously. He nodded. "Yeah. I filed for divorce." I blinked, stunned. My parents? After all these years? They had been married for decades. I had always assumed they'd weather every storm. But clearly, even the strongest roots can crack under pressure. But there wasn't time to unpack that. Not yet. We had too much else to face first. Once we got back, the conversation faded into the background as we shifted focus to unloading the van. There was something therapeutic about it, going through the motions, cleaning the dust off the cabinets and scrubbing down the surfaces that had weathered hundreds of miles. By the time we were done, it was late, but we fired up the grill anyway. Burgers on the patio felt like the right way to end what had become a month-long goodbye. While we ate, no one brought up Hannah or the affair, or the mess that still lingered like smoke after a fire. We talked about the trip, the quirky roadside stops, the unexpected laughs. The girls listened, nodded, even smiled a few times, but they were quieter than usual. Their minds were elsewhere. I could see it in their eyes. I reassured them that they were welcome to visit their grandmother's house anytime they wanted, that none of this would ever change how much they were loved. But they remained distant, kind but guarded. Some hurts take years to heal. Some never do. The days that followed were among the hardest of my life. It became clear that Hannah was unraveling. Each morning seemed darker than the one before. She would cry uncontrollably for hours, unable to process how far things had fallen. Her pain was real, but it came wrapped in a guilt she couldn't admit. And then came the blame. Her parents, full of fury, turned it all on me, as if I had walked out without cause, as if I had been the one to violate our vows. My own mother's frustration grew too, but for different reasons. She watched me shut down. I wasn't picking up my phone, wasn't answering texts. I turned off the world like it was a noisy radio station I just couldn't listen to anymore. Then, about a week later, something happened I didn't see coming. Hannah's parents had her admitted to the psychiatric wing at Methodist Hospital. They were scared she might hurt herself, and while I hadn't expected things to escalate that far, I wasn't shocked. The woman I had known for most of my life, bright, energetic, full of light, was gone. In her place was someone I could barely recognize. A few nights later, I found myself outside her house. I don't even know why I went. Closure? Habit? Maybe some small part of me still wanted to see if anything could be salvaged, even if I knew the answer. The porch lights were on, casting a faint glow over the lawn. I stood there, my heart thudding, before I knocked. When Hannah opened the door, it took everything in me to hide my reaction. She looked like a faded version of herself. Her once-styled blonde hair was pulled back in a messy twist, her skin still sun-kissed from the road but duller somehow. Her eyes had that hollow look I'd seen in people who've lost too much too quickly. And then I noticed what wasn't there. Both her parents' cars and my mom's had been in the driveway earlier that day. But now they were gone. And parked 2 houses down was his car. The same one I'd seen the day our world cracked open. Her lover was back. I looked at her. She was nervously twisting her wedding ring, the same one I'd placed on her finger over 20 years ago. She didn't say it. She didn't have to. He was here. And she had let him come back. Tears welled up in her eyes. Her voice broke the silence. "You left me," she cried out, raw and shaking. "You walked away while I was falling apart. He was the only one who showed up for me when you didn't." Her words stung, but I didn't let them in. I couldn't. "You're telling me you turned to him because I left?" I said quietly. "Hannah, I left because you were with him in the first place." It was like hearing someone kill their parents and then beg for mercy because they're now an orphan. Her logic twisted itself into a pretzel just to make the pain feel justifiable. I'd heard stories about the guy before, how his father once took a bullet during a bar fight and still managed to knock his attacker out cold with a pool cue. A leather belt with a bullet hole in it hung in their family's den like a trophy. The son had always lived in that shadow, trying, failing, always just a little less. That same father had died in a small plane crash about 6 years earlier, leaving his oil company to the same man who had just demolished my family. It was all so absurd it almost felt fictional. Friends and family tried to intervene. Some urged us to go to counseling to try and repair what was broken. But I wasn't interested. This marriage didn't just break, I told them. Hannah collapsed. She was trapped in between. Still technically my wife but already emotionally invested in someone else. Yet she wouldn't move forward with him until I forgave her. She wanted to keep both lifelines until she could be sure which one was safer. It's classic monkey branching, I told anyone who asked. She couldn't let go of me until she was sure he could hold her. Then came her final pitch. "If you stay," she pleaded, "if you just stay, I'll give the ring back. I'll tell him it's over." I stared at her. "Hannah," I said, my voice calm, "the fact that we're having a conversation about you being engaged to another man while still married to me should tell you everything you need to know." She dropped her gaze again, absent-mindedly spinning the wedding ring on her finger like she had that night I found his car outside. In the months that followed, she did everything she could to delay the divorce. Her attorney, a clever woman named Denise Keller, DK for short, used every trick in the book. Motions, extensions, procedural delays. It was a legal marathon designed to wear me down. But I didn't fight back. I finished. I signed over the house to her. I sold my business for its asset value alone. Machines, computers, furniture, and split the money. I gave her half of the earnings and half of the rights to the patents I'd spent years building. I gave her everything I could. And then I let go. I even went further, offering to transfer the remaining rights and restructure the licenses to free myself completely. It was the only way to close that chapter. Because while Hannah kept clinging to the wreckage, I was already writing something new. And that's when PTK Incorporated was born. A new venture. A clean slate. A life not built on shared memories, but forged through hard truth and starting over. A future without her. The company didn't make headlines. No press releases. No buzz on Wall Street. But to me it meant the world. PTK Incorporated, it was a name that came together almost unintentionally, built from the initials of Peter, Taylor, and Kendall. Just 3 letters, but for me and my daughters, it represented something much bigger. A second chance. A symbol that from brokenness, we'd made something new, something that was ours alone. I glanced over at my girls, strong, sharp, grounded, and I smiled. Their eyes held a resilience that took my breath away. Lifting my glass, I toasted the 2 people who had kept me upright when I didn't even know I was falling. To my daughters, I said softly, for their brilliance, their grace, and their patience with me. Kendall quickly shifted the conversation, brushing it off with a half-laugh, but the emotion in her eyes didn't go unnoticed. Then came her voice, hesitant, trembling. "Mom's getting married next Saturday," she said. She asked if we would go. I stared at her, stunned. I blinked once, twice. "She's what?" "She's marrying him," Kendall whispered. "She wants us there." The breath left my lungs. How could I not have known? Later that night, I found myself out on the deck, my old wooden guitar resting against my knee. It had been gathering dust for over a year, untouched through the storm we'd weathered. I wasn't a great player, never was, but I always turned to it when the noise in my head got too loud. I poured a glass of bourbon, sat back, and tried to coax the opening chords of LA Freeway from my fingers. But the strings didn't sound the same. Neither did the memories. As I stumbled through the familiar tune, my phone buzzed, grounding me back in the now. The next morning we were back on the road, heading up I-35 toward Dallas. The 4 of us, me, the girls, and unexpectedly, my father. When I asked him why he wanted to come along, he just gave me that sly grin I'd known since childhood. "I can't miss the drama," he said with a wink. We dropped him off at the Hilton so he could check in, then made our way to the hospital. The mood in the car was tense, quiet. I could feel my daughters bracing for something we all knew wouldn't be easy. Inside the waiting area, the air was sterile and heavy. I scanned the room and spotted a man sitting in the far corner, hunched over, lost in thought. And then I saw her. My mother. Her eyes met mine and instantly her expression hardened. The disappointment radiated off her like heat from a furnace. "This is unconscionable," she muttered, low and sharp. Kendall touched my arm gently. "Dad, she wants to see you." I looked across the room. Hannah's parents were there, 2 eyes pleading. Waiting. Her father finally spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "Please, Pete." It would mean the world to her. I let the air out of my lungs, long and slow. My heart was heavy, but my mind was clear. "I can't," I said, my tone quiet but firm. "I'm not her family anymore. I'm not even a friend. I'm just someone she used to be married to." The silence that followed was brutal. And then came the tears. We left the hospital not long after. The weight of it all pressed down as we drove south, back to Austin. The city felt the same, but we weren't. Before leaving Fort Worth, I had one final conversation with Hannah's father. We sat together in his garage, 2 old lawn chairs, a cooler between us. We didn't solve anything. We didn't pretend to. We just talked. About Hannah, about the wreckage, about how sometimes there's no fixing what's been shattered. We said what needed to be said, then we stood, shook hands, and parted ways. Her wedding came and went. She disappeared before the first dance. My mother and Emily went looking for her, but I knew better. She was already gone. Maybe not physically, but in every other way that mattered. I couldn't save her. And I couldn't keep holding on to someone who didn't want to be found. I had loved her. Deeply. Fiercely. That love had defined me for so long, I didn't know where it ended and I began. But life moves forward. Taylor and Kendall settled into college life like they were born for it. My new patents took off faster than I expected. PTK Incorporated started turning real numbers, real clients. For the first time in a long while, I felt something solid beneath my feet. And with that stability came a sense of curiosity. So I opened the door to dating. Just slightly. Just enough to let in the possibility that maybe, somewhere out there, was someone who could meet me where I was. That's how I met Elizabeth. She was sharp, grounded, and no stranger to heartbreak. She had been married before, briefly, to a lawyer who saw her more as a stepping stone than a partner. He'd used her name, her connections, trying to gain entry into Bonham, McLeod and Garcia, the oldest law firm in Texas. When that door didn't open, his interest in her closed. The divorce was swift. Painless, legally speaking. He packed up and moved to California, disappearing almost overnight. Elizabeth didn't care about age. She cared about stability. About kindness. About shared effort. One morning, she stepped into the hallway wearing black yoga pants and a soft white t-shirt. Her hand instinctively rested on her slightly rounded stomach. I had thought about a vasectomy years ago but never followed through. Now, standing there, the emotion that washed over me was hard to name. Wonder. Fear. Maybe even hope. Then I saw movement, out of the corner of my eye. I turned toward the foyer. And there she stood. Anna. She was just there. Like a ghost from a life I had finally buried. Her face was a picture of confusion. I stepped toward the door and gently closed it behind me. That was the woman I used to be married to, I told Elizabeth quietly. I never saw Hannah again after that. But I heard whispers. Pieces of her story floating through family, friends, and mutual acquaintances. She had fallen into something deep. Something dark. Eventually, she was committed to a psychiatric facility. And that was the end of her chapter in my life. I didn't hate her. I didn't even pity her. I just let go. Because sometimes, the only way to begin again is to finally stop trying to fix what never should have broken.